Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Share Your Story with Ellie podcast. I'm your host, Ellie B, and I'm so happy to be back with you this Tuesday. We've got a special week in store on the podcast as two of my dear friends from the Book Proposal Bootcamp join me on the show. To provide a little context, back in fall of 2020, which, how has it almost been 4 years, we were among the few selected to be part of the inaugural Book Proposal Bootcamp hosted by Proverbs 31 Ministries. After an application process, about 100 of us learned the process of writing a book proposal under the guidance and direction of the staff from the Proverbs 31 team. In about 12 weeks, we took classes, participated in group discussions, completed homework assignments, and had the opportunity to connect with publishers and the Proverbs 31 team, and most importantly, Lisa Turkhurst herself. By the end of the 12 weeks, we had a completed book proposal in hand, and a few were selected to receive a publishing deal. While no one from my cohort was selected to publish our books at the end of the course, I know the bootcamp was instrumental in each of our lives. All of us hope to spread the good news through writing and other content opportunities, and this gave us so much insight and information. Today on the show, you'll hear my conversation with Jay Powers. Jay currently lives in Brandon, Mississippi, and is a certified professional coach. He also hosts a podcast with his daughter Hilary called the PowersShift Podcast that releases every Wednesday. In this episode, Jay shares the life-altering moment his wife almost died and the ripple effects that had on his faith and his family. He shares with raw honesty the questions he faced as well as the decisions he made to choose to see God in the midst of his deep pain and disappointment. Jay also speaks of how his purpose in life has shifted and how he wants to help younger generations walk through life with a zeal for what they are called to. I know you're going to love this conversation. So without further delay, let's tune in to listen to Jay's story. Well, Jay, I'm so excited to welcome you to the Share Your Story podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here. It's been a while.
I know. As I was going back through, because I still stay in touch a little bit, especially with Melissa and my writing partner, Abby, but here and there via Instagram. But as I was going back through, like, who are some people that I really want to share stories of, I started thinking back to what was the origin of even this podcast, which was the Book Proposal Bootcamp. And going back through our email threads and text threads and all that, it was like, gosh, what a crazy season of life. So just to kind of get started so people know who you are, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Just general, like name, occupation, where you live, all the above.
Name, rank, and serial number? No.
Yeah, exactly.
My name's Jay Powers, and I live in Brandon, Mississippi. And I'm a father and a husband and friend to lots of people.
That I know.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Let's drop it back to how we met through this Book Proposal Bootcamp. That was back in what, 2020?
Something like that.
Or 2021?
Somewhere in there. Yeah. Honestly, I don't remember.
I feel like it was 2020 because I think it was just so many crazy times all at once.
Isn't that weird? It's like 3 or 4, almost 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what, you want me to tell that story a little bit?
Yeah, I would love for you to.
So a friend of mine, Mark, which you know.
Yes.
We decided to write a book, and we felt like it was kind of like what you and I talked about offline about. I just felt like it was something God was directing us to, or leading us to, or allowing us to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we started looking at ways to get better at writing. Mark's an academic, and I'm a corporate guy, and so he looked around and found this. I'm going to call it a writing clinic. It was just for people who wanted to write, and I think we all applied. And this big pool of writers applied, and there was several hundred of us that got paid for this clinic.
Yeah,
this work. What would you call it? A workshop?
Yeah, I think it was the very first time they even offered it. So even for us, it is probably a little bit up in the air as to what it was. Even could we call it, because it was
guinea pigs, I think.
I think so too. And it felt like drinking from a fire hose. Like there was just so much information that was amazing, but I don't think I recognized how much homework or classes or all the above.
Yeah. It was like a scene out of Shawshank Redemption. They strip you down naked and hose you and throw white powder all over you.
Seriously.
Like
it was because I think for me, at least personally, yes, it was about the writing, about learning what the publishing world was like, about what's required of writing a book. Because similar to you and Mark, I feel like I do have a calling to write a book one day, but I didn't know any information. So that was really informative, but it also forced you to go back through your own story and what you're even writing about. So it was almost a level of counseling and grief alongside people.
Yeah. It was, for us, it was, plus we were a team.
Right.
And so we got there and they wouldn't let me come to the meetings.
Yes.
The people that were hosting it.
Right.
And I think I forget if we had to pay double. Anyway, I was not a happy guy in that. But the breakout groups were a different story. So, yeah, that's where we met you and others. And so Mark and I came to that. We didn't get picked in the end, but it sparked growth opportunities for us, especially for me, about my attitude and learning how to trust God a little more in those kind of situations where you don't have any control, or not much control. So that's how we met. And then we got into this smaller group with you, and that's kind of that's where we met.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those smaller groups, because you're right. I remember you weren't in the actual lesson planning days, but we would schedule time afterwards to say, okay, after all this information, let's get together and go through what kind of editors do we need to hire, or let's proofread each other's. And those were so instrumental just in my growth personally, but also in the writing, because it's one thing, because it was somewhat of a competition. It wasn't, but there was.
It was a competition.
It was a competition. There was a deal at the end. But the beauty of that was we all were so cheering each other on.
Yeah.
And the smaller groups helped us to more intimately offer feedback or understand a story. So I remember we did kind of like everyone gets a week. So talk about your story, talk about what it is you want to write about, what's the point of your book. And then the homework was to go over each of our assignments. And so we got in depth quick.
You remember what the name of our book was?
No.
It was What's the Point?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I remember actually y'all's book so specifically because so much of your investment was around the younger generation and not knowing what is the point of this life.
Right.
And I was like, I know quite a few men who need to pick up that book and read it immediately.
You need to finish writing it first.
I mean, me too. It is that proposal has stood on pause ever since that process.
Yeah. But that was, I think I second Ellie. That actually is the impetus for kind of what we're doing now. Mark's writing on that book, and I'm writing, and we're writing separately. Yeah. Together. That's kind of led Hilary and I, who is one of my twins, to start this podcast, and we've been wanting to do it for 10 years.
Right.
And so now we are doing a podcast that's called PowersShift, and it's about intergenerational connection.
Yeah. It's amazing.
A lot of that came out of that incubator, that writing workshop, and some other things back there. So
yeah, agreed. Yeah. I think that workshop did a lot to teach us about the publishing industry, and there were so many things that kind of pulled back the curtain on what's required. And as all things, like things are changing these day and age, especially with social media and understanding what an audience looks like or how you have to market and sell. Yeah. And I don't think I realized how much was really on the author to provide so much of that. And that I think has changed in the last, let's say 10 years or so. But that was a big motivation in understanding what really is your purpose here. What are you trying to offer? And it's come out in other ways. Like you said, I think the impetus even starting back then that's how this podcast came to be, is through that.
Yeah. Your podcast. Yeah. I think back there too, it was at the end of the day, and I don't mean this with any disrespect to the publishing industry, but it's all about money. Even the Christian, publishing houses want to give something, that people can use, but they still have to make a profit. So we kind of saw that backside of that industry too. And another thing I learned back there was they were looking for people who had a platform.
Right.
Well, in the meantime, I had like 5 followers.
Right.
It was my family and me, and maybe Mark. But now, we've got about 25,000 followers on some of those platforms.
Yeah.
So it's weird how all that happens. But
It is. And it's an interesting thing to balance too, especially when what you're sharing about your story is so personal and it also is centered around your faith. There's this weird juxtaposition of building a platform against offering your story in humility and wanting to help. Yeah. And I think that was some of the challenge that all of us felt in that small group of, I don't want to build a platform for the sake of a platform.
Right.
And yet building a platform is what helps your story go further, or what helps more people. And I think each of us have found that in different creative outlets. Like I look at Baylor and Melissa and just some of the other people that we went through that program with, and none of us yet have published a book. But I do think it's coming in different ways.
And I think it's all of that, the platform to me, and what my daughter and I talk a lot about is, I'm chasing a rabbit here, so if you need to edit this.
No, you're not.
It's like the gospel is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and me. So Jesus said, go make disciples, and he's going to disciple them and teach them everything that I've commanded you.
Right.
Well, you can use a platform for that, and 25,000 people is a lot of platform.
That is.
And it's also just a way to, when you do those live events, I did one on that first video that I ever did, and about 500 people showed up. I mean,
wow.
When could you ever do that the old way?
It's true. It's true.
So I think God can use, and especially in your generation, Ellie, you and that, the Xers and the Zers and now the Alphas. You guys are some of you are tech natives, and you can go in and do that, and it's just part of the way your life is.
Right.
And I think God's using it. In fact, I think He's taking that and getting glory out of that. I
agree.
Don't know how it all works, but anyway, it's exciting.
No, I totally agree. Okay, well, now I need you to tell how you got to 25,000 followers and that first video that absolutely took off.
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to probably be your grandfather.
No.
I'm pretty sure I am. But anyway, yeah, I've been married for 42 years, and I met my wife. This is interesting. I met my wife in St. Augustine, Florida.
Oh my gosh, I forgot. Yes.
Yeah, remember, and I lived in Jacksonville, and so I was getting out of the Navy. Met her there. We moved to Mississippi. This was in like 1980. And we got married, started a family, and Lori was an athlete, strong athlete, swimming and diving and things like that. Anyway, she was in really good shape, but she had a slow heart rate. And every time she'd get pregnant, the doctors would go, "Are you a runner?" And she was, and she'd say yes. And so they'd go, "Oh, okay, that's why your heart rate is so low."
Right.
But it was in 1991, I believe, 1991, right in there. In October, we were sitting down to watch a movie. I put the kids to bed. We had four kids under the age of 10. And I'm going to do bullet points here because I can go way in the weeds.
Oh, I love way in the weeds. That is what I live for.
All right. So she goes, "Hey, I feel dizzy." So at that time, we were in our 30s. That was 33 years ago. So do the math. So she said, "I feel dizzy." And when you're in your 30s, you don't go, "Oh, there's something wrong." You go, "Probably didn't eat today or whatever."
Right.
And I said, "Well, just go to the doctor then, go get it checked out," and turn back to the TV screen. And then I heard as we were watching, I heard a slight gasp from behind me, like, just a breath intake of air. And I looked back on the couch, and Lori looked like she was having a seizure.
Wow.
And so it almost didn't register. She was posturing, or she was rigid.
Right.
And I ran to the phone. It was in the other room to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten some hater mail on this from in TikTok, but
that is where hate lives in TikTok comments.
I ran to the phone, but halfway there, it wasn't audible, but I clearly heard "no, take her." Like
wow!
That, right, and so I literally turned around, ran back, and picked her up.
Mm.
And when I picked her up, she wet herself, and I knew. I said something is bad,
very wrong.
Something's bad, and I got scared then.
Right.
So I ran and threw her in the van, got my neighbor who was a volunteer fireman, and we headed from our subdivision to the hospital, which was 4 or 5 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend told me later on, about 5 years later, he said, when we got out to that main street, she was flatlined, and he knew.
Wow.
He was a trained guy. And he said,
right.
He had no pulse at all.
Mm.
So I didn't know that. So I'm driving crazy toward the hospital.
Right.
And he screamed at me to stop. And I skidded into this driveway of this house.
Mm.
And it happened to be his son's house.
Wow.
His son is a nurse, RN, and his son's wife was an EMT.
Wow.
And they were standing at the back of their car with the trunk lid open, and they had just come from a volunteer fire department meeting, and they had all the rescue gear in their trunk.
Mm.
So I dragged Lori out on the ground, and she was turning blue by then. So this is all happened in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Right.
So I start doing compressions.
Yeah.
1, 2, doing that, and then I was stopping and I was praying in her ear. I was going, I speak life into you in the name of Jesus. And I was doing that. And meanwhile, they got a hold of the volunteer fire department, and they were standing there watching me. They're going, this guy crazy? And,
wow.
They said, leave him alone. So I'm compressing, touching her sternum on her backbone.
Right.
And they called, this is when cell phones, you don't remember this time, Ellie, but cell phones had only been out, in the common market for about a year.
Right.
Somebody had one, and they called the hospital, and the doctor said, I don't care how you get her here now.
Wow.
We tried to call the ambulances, and both of them were on runs.
Wow.
So we threw in the back of a pickup for the rest of the way to the hospital, and it took them, the doctors, 30 minutes to get her heart beating again. They had to hit her 5 times with the defibrillator. And
wow.
Back then, the ambulances in our town didn't have those defibrillators. Now
right, just with them.
Buy one for your house.
Right.
Back then, they were a big cart. And so they hit her, and it took 30 minutes. And I heard the doctor talking. He said, I don't know what this is. It's not a heart attack. I don't know. So they said they put her up in intensive care and gave her a 2% chance of surviving the night. So I called my pastor and all that, and I went down in the lobby in the waiting room, and there were 100 of my friends down there, and everybody was praying, and
wow,
they sent it to the PTL club on
right.
TV and all that. Everybody was praying, and I went home. There's a lot of blank spots in there,
of course, yeah.
But I went home, slept for a little while, and took a shower and came back to the hospital. And when I got there, the nurse came running down in the hall and said, she's coming out of the coma. So I ran up there and interrupt anytime you want. I ran up to the room, and she was looking at me. She goes, I know you. And I went, yeah, you should. I've been married for 9 years. She goes, I saw you doing CPR on me. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was looking over your shoulder and you were doing CPR.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's no way that she could possibly know that. So I kind of hid that in my heart. And she went from having a 2% chance of surviving and having so about 2 weeks later, coming home with no heart damage.
Wow.
and on no medication. They put a defibrillator in. Back then they were about that big, like about the size of a Walkman. Now it's about the size of a 50-cent piece. But so we went from that, and it totally changed our lives and the way we lived, because she was not the same person. She had a brain injury. It was significant, but if you didn't know her, you wouldn't have known that she had one. But anyway, it took 5 years for her to heal. But when we brought her home, her short-term memory was just gone.
Wow. She'd
forget where the kid, Jordan, our youngest child, was a year old. She'd forget where he was. Her moods would swing, and she'd have she'd forget things and was disconnected.
Right.
And it made me angry. I
can't even imagine.
Well, I was mad at God. I was mad at her. Why her? Why us?
Right.
Why me? All me-centered stuff.
Well, and I mean, you go through that amount of emergency and trauma, and you can see elements of like, okay, God took care of us, and the fact that I had my neighbor that were at his son's house and all these things. But you kind of go from that, I'm sure, absolute fear gripping to just keep her alive where you're praying to then almost, but this is the way you're going to keep her alive? Because this is not the person I know. And those are two very different griefs at once.
Yeah, it was, I couldn't even sleep with her for probably 2 or 3 months because I'd listen to her breathing patterns and I'd go, stop breathing. And so I slept on the floor and beside the bed for a while. And then I started having debilitating panic attacks. I think it was the trauma, the post-traumatic stuff. But they were so intense, and I never knew when they were going to happen, but I could feel them coming on. And so I probably should have had therapy, but I didn't even really think about it, and to deal with some of that. I went to a friend of mine who was a psychiatrist, and he said, I can drug you or you can talk about it. And that's what he said. And I said, well, let me try the drugs. And it was worse for me. So I started talking about it, processing it. It took about 2 years for those panic attacks to go away.
Subside.
But in that process of anger, probably one of the most pivotal encounters with God in my whole life.
Yeah.
I was raging. I was sitting in a park near the house yelling, and my prayers were rated R most of the time. And I was yelling.
David had some of those. It's okay.
That's true. Yeah. And I said, God, it's not, I was just mad. And he went, it was like when I ran to the phone, it was that clear. This was 30 years ago. He said, wait a minute, son. If I want to bring Lori home, I'm not going to ask your permission. I'm God and you're not.
Yeah.
You can be mad. You can hold your breath and turn blue and even die if you want to.
Right.
But you can't manipulate me.
And
he goes, this is all in my thinking. He said, I love her more than you do. And by the way, I love you too, son. And
wow.
And I say that in the video, but that was the first time I had to, where I felt like the Lord was saying, trust me, even though you have no control over this.
Right.
I want you to trust me. And Ellie, that's been a journey for me. I'm 60, I'll be 69 this year. That has been a constant since then in my life.
Yes.
Probably before that, but now
right.
I had awareness of it.
And
God is always saying, trust me. Do you trust me?
Right.
Will you trust me?
Yes. And
that's a learning that I'm going through right now in terms of where I am as far as being who God has called me to be.
Yeah.
More than what he's called me to do. It's, I've called you to be my son. Now I want you to be my son.
Wow.
So
there's a huge difference between those two, because I would say that is something I struggle with too. I would say I'm constantly in the same process of, it's kind of that Job moment that you had, which is, did you raise the stars? Job, did you place these mountains? And I know I'm getting the specifics wrong, but just where he kind of looks at Job in the midst of all of his suffering and says, did you create any of this stuff? Do you really know the origin and the purpose of these things? And it's a little bit of a snap back into reality, but coming from a place of love but I love you and I have purpose for you and I've love for the things you love more than you can possibly imagine.
Well, yeah. And he loves us more. He goes, you don't even know what it is. I love you. I'm the one that made you. I know you better than you know you, and I know, Ellie, you've been through your own, you have your own story of grief and processing all of that. Yeah. So it's where God has, I want to stick to what you want to talk about, but where God has me now is I want you to affirm, validate, encourage, challenge, and support whoever I put in your way.
Wow.
In whatever way that is.
Mm.
And Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and me.
Mm.
The good news is that Jesus came like he said he would.
Yes.
He opened the door and gave us the Holy Spirit to give us the power and access to the Father so we can have intimacy.
Right.
It's not you say yes to Jesus so you go to heaven when you die. That's inevitable if you're a believer.
Yeah.
That's a done deal.
Right.
How are we going to live our lives now?
Mm.
How are we going to be God's people now?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, and a lot of that perspective only comes through being that broken.
Yeah. Well, Jesus said it, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, that's the thing that irritates me about us as the church in the West sometimes is we go, hey, just give your heart to Jesus and everything will be soft serve ice cream and unicorns, and it's like wrong.
Right.
Jesus warned us there would be this trouble.
Yeah.
But that's what he said is I'm sending you the comforter. I'm giving you the ability to be able to live in this life with trials and with joy.
Right. Because he says, take heart, I have overcome the world. And it's not even that we will overcome it in our offering ourselves to him. It's that he promises that he would be with us.
Right. And he said, don't be afraid. And why did he say it so much?
Because we are. All the time.
He says it a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, take me back a little bit to, you said you were really angry with God. And and Lori's healing was over 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So take me back to some of those, because I'm sure in a lot of ways, number one, you're still parenting. Mm-hmm. And at this point, you're somewhat also a caretaker in the how is Lori different and discovering that.
Yeah.
So what does your day-to-day look like? And what do your conversations with God look like? Or are you even having them during some of that time?
I went through sorry, I can chase rabbits all day long.
No, I love it. I do too.
Yeah, this took about 10 years.
Mm.
I'll be very honest with you, Ellie. When that was happening, I met the Lord when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
You asked that question of me, and I'm like, okay, well, I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor. I knew all about God from literally the time I was born. My dad held me up like Lion King and dedicated me to God, and so I always knew about it.
Right.
But when I was 16, during the Jesus movement and all that, I'm in the 70s. In my dad's church, I just asked the Holy Spirit, asked Jesus to be the boss of my life, and I don't usually look for emotional manifestation, but I got smacked. It just felt like God just poured warm honey over my head. That's the only way I can describe it. But and I grew up in a very legalistic denomination.
Yes.
But I got baptized. All the Jesus people stuff was going on. I got baptized in the Holy Spirit and I call it the charismaniac scent. And it changed me.
Yeah.
And so I had that, but then so you flash. It's weird how short of a period of time was. That was 72. And so it was 10 or 12 years later, this happens with my wife.
Yes.
I ran. There was about a 10-year period where I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to be around any of that. I actively chased having an affair with anybody that would sit still. God foiled those attempts. I'm so grateful because I was trying.
Right.
And I don't know what I was trying to prove there. You know, if you really so I was doing that. The day to day was coming home, meals being burned, her being angry. One time we were in the post office and she didn't, her emotional part of her brain was damaged. So she would react. And the postal clerk was going too slow and she about jumped over the counter and wanted to punch their lights out.
Yeah.
We were in the parking lot of the grocery store one day and we saw some of our friends. She pulled her pants down and mooned them right in the middle of the daytime in the parking lot. And I'm going, gosh, did you just do that?
Right.
And then she'd go, did I just do that? And then she'd be humiliated and
right.
because it just, things weren't connected. And so that took therapy, her working with neuro psychologists and some stuff to get her to relearn some of those things. And it was a struggle. Three of the children don't remember Lori before.
Wow.
Our oldest daughter, Haley, remembers her.
Yeah.
So that's been hard for her too. But as you grow, I say this sometimes, it's kind of a cliche thing, but Jesus loves you just like you are.
Yes.
But he has no intention of leaving you like that.
Yes.
And so all my stupidity and foolishness, God protected me. And I remember one time I was thinking about this, having this affair, and this is being really honest.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it.
Okay.
No, it is.
But I was going, you know what? If I do this, because it was like a willing partner, you know, the other person, you know, she would have done it with
right.
engaged in that affair. I started counting up who it would affect immediately.
Wow.
My wife, her husband, our kids, our friends, the body, the churches where we went. You know, and I added it up. It was about 400 people.
Wow.
And I went, you know what? For just a few minutes of fun and getting your ego, you know, stroked and all that, it's just not worth it. And then as I had that awareness, God started going, I want to heal you.
Yeah.
And if you're game, I will do that. He won't ever make you do it, by the way.
Right.
There can be circumstances where you wish he would make you do it. But
no
he won't
kidding.
make you do it.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for your honesty, because I think there were decisions I made, especially after my mom passed, that I was so sure that God was going to heal her, and so utterly convinced, and put so much trust there. And I'm sure that's a lot of what, you know, growing up in the church, you know, your marriage, 4 kids, all of that, you're living in that. And so when something so world rocking happens, there's an element of rebellion, I think, inside my own spirit, where I never let go of God. I think,
what do you think that is, Ellie?
I think it's where your trust feels like it's been broken. And so you want to act in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
If I can't trust you, then watch me. You can't trust me. And I think it's some of that legalism, because I wouldn't say I grew up necessarily in legalism. That's just my personality, is to follow the rules. So when you've kind of been in that pattern of, I do the right thing for the right reason, for the right people, and this is how things are going to end up, and it still goes so horribly the opposite direction, you're like, then what's the point? Why would I keep walking in that obedience? And even to some degree, it's just like serving a little bit of something that feels like it could feel good. Like, if everybody else does it, why shouldn't I?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think it's, when you said that, it just, little aha thing is really when we say that about we know better.
Yep.
It's really idolatry, because we're saying we know better than God.
Yep. Yep.
which is really a dumb thing to do.
No kidding.
You know,
Well, in the
not
same
hard.
way that I think that's honestly such a practical way to say how will this one decision affect so many other people.
Sure.
And that is still, the blessing of being a believer and one who is accepted the Lord and the Holy Spirit is that he is still with us and he is still working. So even that question came to you through the Holy Spirit. You couldn't have come up with that on your own in the midst of that much pain.
I agree with
and,
that.
And there's a few of those questions that I started to ask myself, who do I want to be? And are these decisions I'm making? And I'll be honest, none of them were, regardless of what the decisions were, but there started to be some where I was like, is this the person I want to be in 6 months, in 5 years? Where is this direction going? Similar to who does this affect? Like, this isn't a me decision. And you're right. It's a place that once he has the invitation of, okay, I want to heal you, it's more accepting that he's going to do the work. And it's the first step in trusting him again.
Oh man, that's so true, Ellie. It's like those ignorant but innocent prayers you prayed when you were 18 of,
yes,
dear God, just make me in your image. Well, he doesn't forget, even if
no.
you do.
Exactly.
He keeps bringing it back up.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is, the cool thing is I know you're a lot younger than me, and you're learning those things now.
Mm-hmm.
Something the Lord said to me recently was he said something to me about just resting in Him.
Yes,
and that it's easy to say that, but it's a lot harder to do that. And you
absolutely
have to practice it.
100%. I have had to learn the same lesson because I think it comes out of that same place of legalism of doing something, or you have to be the one to choose your healing or walk through it. And without getting to the depths, recently I experienced an extreme disappointment of just something I thought he was doing and he didn't. And even in this place, there's still days where, I'm in a pattern of like, this is how I read my Bible every morning. This is the devotional I pick up. Here's the scripture I listen to when I go for a walk. There were 3 days afterwards where I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I don't feel any place in doing it. And some of it was the rest of, okay, well, it doesn't matter if you've checked the boxes. I am still in you and I am still with you and you can be right here. And the resting in that, which is not me working towards something like, nope, I still have to read my Bible in order to get to where he's going to point me to go. I can just be disappointed for a minute and rest.
Or it's like I have a spiritual director. That's another thing I've done as I'm in this growth, this formation, transformation process. And that's kind of it's been a Catholic thing for a lot of years, but even evangelicals, and which I don't consider myself one. I'm a follower of Jesus and his teachings. I like the labels, but bringing your doubts, bringing your fears. My spiritual director told me, I don't want you to read the Bible. I don't want you to pray, sing, or listen to Christian music. I want you to go sit in silence and solitude and just be in the presence of God.
Wow.
Ellie, have you ever tried to do that? I haven't. It's hard.
It's so hard
to do it.
I've been given the same advice in some seasons. And it is funny because number one, a spiritual director. I love. When did you start meeting with him? Yeah.
I started meeting with Craig in it's been 3 years now.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, you're a rule follower.
Mm-hmm.
I probably am somewhere, but I'm a gray person. If we can bend it, let's bend it.
Yeah.
And that gets people like you keep people like me out of prison. Somebody has to follow the guide. But that's the thing is, if I do all this stuff, then we don't say this out loud because it goes against what we believe. Really.
Right.
If I do all this stuff, then Jesus will love me more.
Yes.
He'll love me more than Ellie because I read my Bible.
Right.
Nobody ever says it.
Mm-hmm. But we're all thinking it in different ways. Yeah.
So like I'm a Dallas Willard fan. And,
yes.
Dallas Willard said, bring your doubts, bring your fears to God because that's where faith grows.
Yeah.
Well, my spiritual director, he says things like, you need to go put all this stuff down and just sit.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jesus there, Ellie, whether you feel him or not?
Yes.
Okay, and then how do you practice that?
Right.
Okay, here I am, Jesus. Don't feel you, see you, smell you, taste you, but I'm stepping into your presence.
Mm-hmm.
And in my imaginative contemplation time, it's Jesus and I sitting knee to knee and forehead to forehead,
Wow.
hand on my shoulder, just loving me.
Wow.
And I grew up where, I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to, where we didn't say it, but we believed that God hated us and had a terrible plan for our life.
Yeah.
And that's how we live. And
Right.
Jesus is going, no, I died and resurrected for you to liberate you.
Mm.
Why are you acting like you're still a captive?
Wow.
You are liberated. So if you're my daughter, if you're my son, act like it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do we do that? That's where the whole discipleship of Jesus comes in.
Yes. Yes.
And for me, it's having the help of a spiritual director.
I think putting those types of people in your life, I'm thankful for the way I grew up and that I was surrounded by a lot of my mom's friends who were, far and beyond where I was, but I watched them walk out some of those practices of not just, there was a lot of reading the Bible, listen to worship music, all of that. That was just my environment.
Same, yeah.
But they were always willing to, what's he teaching me next? What's this next season? And I think John Mark Comer, actually, he has that Practicing the Way that just released. Yes. And Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, all of those books challenge me so much because it's interesting, actually, over the last couple of years, I've kind of asked myself this question. God kind of led me to this place of like, I know I love him because of what he did for me. He died on the cross for me. It means I'll be reunited with him. It means I'll have a purpose in heaven. It means I'll see my mom again. But what are the characteristics I love about Jesus? Not just about what he did for me. And so really digging deep into the Gospels. And honestly, sometimes it's confusing because I think the non-Christian view of Jesus is he's just the soft, gentle, vulnerable character who walks around healing and comforting people.
Why would we?
Which he does.
But why would we follow somebody that was stupid or not very?
Yes,
not a very good leader.
Right. And so, in digging through the Gospels and then understanding resources, because I haven't read the book yet of John Mark Comer's Practicing the Way, but I've listened to his podcast a lot.
Yeah.
And understanding the practice of what it means like to truly be an apprentice of Jesus, as he calls it, someone who's learning the ways that he operates. You're right. Sometimes it is having those people around you that can help you see like, okay, let's stop with the chores almost you've created around the always read this many chapters of the Bible and whatnot, and let's worship for a while. You need to realign your heart with how beautiful he is, or, just those other people observing and offering if they've been 6 steps ahead of you, and help guide you in that direction.
Ellie, what do you think Jesus wants?
Ultimately, my heart.
Ding,
yeah.
Ding, ding. Yeah. It's like he could care less about how many books you read.
Right.
Does it help? Yes. John Mark Comer is friends with a guy named Pete Greig, which is, he wrote that book, How to Hear God.
Yes.
A Simple Guide for Normal People.
All
of those guys are part of this movement right now within the body of Christ that has to do with prayer.
Yes.
And, Tim Mackey from the Bible, those guys are all, they all know each other.
Yes.
But what the point of that is somebody your age, how does somebody your age and somebody my age interact with each other? I feel like that my role somehow is to invest in your generation.
Right.
You guys are running the world right now. It's weird, and what God is calling us to do is invest. Navy SEAL teams have a medic that goes with them everywhere they go.
Wow.
And so a naval corpsman goes with them on all their missions. And so I feel like as boomers and maybe some Xers, our job is to bless you guys and worship for you. That's part of our role is where we're at now. That has probably nothing to do with the script.
No, I think that's so important because I think a lot of times what culture is selling us is a lot of separation, period.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that about a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
but especially when it comes to generations, there's your generation had these advantages, but these disadvantages. Now, because of the work we did, now you get to experience this, but here's your challenge. And there's a lot of like benchmarks or separate places. And also the other portion of that is just that we're in this mentality, I think, especially as a world where you have benchmarks to arrive at places. Mm-hmm. So it's like you graduate school, you're supposed to get this degree, then it means get the job, then it means have the family, then it means, and you kind of are getting to a place where, okay, I can time out of all my responsibilities and benchmarks and be done.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important perspective that you're sharing, which is our work is not done. It's just pointing in a different direction.
Well, yeah. Show me in the Bible where it talks about retirement.
Right. Yeah.
And the Lord told me, there's no retirement and there's no shortcuts.
Mm.
Those are formative things.
Yeah.
And I feel like I had this. It was weird. I got this video from a young woman in Brazil.
Wow.
Who is she's a Gen Z
mm-hmm.
medical student, and a friend of mine was down there on some sort of mission trip, and they met, and this young woman was apologizing for her generation not honoring my generation. I don't know this kid from Adam, I mean, yeah. And she sends me this video, but what the Lord was showing me was you can be a boomer.
Mm.
And be a jerkwad about it, and and just not engage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think God's going, there's no shortcuts here. You don't skip grades in the kingdom of God. Mm. And what I've called you to be, it's really kind of a little harsh, is I expect you to be that.
Mm.
You can say no.
Right.
You're not going to be able to get where I want you to be and being a human being and fully my man.
Yeah.
If you choose to stay where you're at.
Mm.
I love this kind of stuff, interactions like you and I are having, because it breaks down barriers.
Yes.
Just by
talking,
agree. So anyway.
I agree. No, I agree. And is that really kind of, when did you start getting it? I know it's not something you're actively accepting clients in necessarily right now, but is that kind of what got you into life coaching? Kind of that mentality?
Kind of, it's like I'm a people magnet.
Yeah.
And you are too. I know that about you.
Yeah.
Like, you can be in a Sonic restaurant and people will come up and start confessing their sins.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, So I was going, God's going, what are you going to do with that?
Mm.
And I was in my corporate job, and I was going, I could do this for 10 more years, but dang it, I don't want to.
Yeah.
And so I started praying about that. And then my company said, hey, about a year ago, you said if we'd pay you to go away, you would. Did you mean that? And I went, yeah, I did. I really meant it. And so they came and I'm telling, this is a long answer, but they came and said, okay, you can retire. We'll pay you. And I said, well, you send me to school because I want to do this coaching thing.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out how to. This is probably something that I just saw this right now while we're talking.
Yeah.
Is I didn't want to be a pastor like my dad was.
Mm.
One, they were poor.
Yeah, that's so true.
And two, it was before a lot of televangelists, but and I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think the Lord never wanted me to do it.
Not in that way.
Yeah. And so when he, this whole thing about coaching, I got coached.
Yeah.
Wow, this is cool. And so I said, when I was retiring, I said, would you send me this tool for this? And they said, yeah, if you'll use it here before you retire. So it was a University of Texas executive coaching certification program.
Wow.
Postgraduate degree.
I
had an MBA. And so they sent me to school, paid for it. And then when I retired, that's when I started doing just coaching in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still coach. I can't help it.
Yeah.
That's another thing God's teaching me is I want you to be quiet. You can't tell that on this interview, but it's I want you to listen. and he's teaching me how to be a good listener, and I want you to talk less and wait for me to tell you what to say.
Wow.
So this whole right now, what you're seeing me in is this whole formative place of learning to discern. I'm reading a book, Live Like Jesus, and learn how to discern.
Yes.
And not just have the gift of discernment, but learn to be a discerning person. So, like in this situation with you and me, what I see God doing in you, we haven't talked in a year or so, but
yeah,
God is setting you up for success in a way that you haven't anticipated.
Thank you.
You judge that. You
right.
That, but it's like you've got a skill which you'll want to rely on. But
yes,
he's saying is lean in on me,
Ellie.
Ellie, lean in and let me teach you what I want you to know, so that when you do this, your influence will be. You won't be able to contain it.
Wow, thank you for that. I mean, I think as you're speaking on discerning and listening, I think that's also evident in your podcast now with your daughter of sitting across and, again, like you said, mending what those generational gaps have been and instead listening. Because that is, I think I say this a lot about walking through cancer with my mom. There was a lot that I didn't understand about, and granted, I'm not working in the field or anything, but there's a lot I didn't understand about the healthcare system or insurance or what it means to have a family member that's that sick. And
you were really young too.
Right. And just what is it like to walk through grief in your young 20s when everybody else is like, woohoo, life is fun. And you're like, this is hard and I don't want to do any of it. And I think in that it gives you such perspective and it allows you to be empathetic to so many different situations. And I would say even in your podcast now with Hilary, it's a lot about how do I listen and empathize with your experience while also sharing the wisdom of what I've walked through.
Well, what you're saying are characteristics of Jesus. He knew how to, he was a master at discernment, and he was a master at reading. He is a master of reading people. Yeah, and I think the backstory with Hilary is, so she, when she was about 18, we kind of parted ways, and the Holy Spirit impressed on me greatly, and it's clear how you handle this is going to make all the difference in the world, because you can really jack this up if you decide to. Trust me.
Yeah.
Stay out of my way and let me do what I do. That's the Holy Spirit is saying that to me. And he goes, you love her. Your job is to love her and to pray for her. And Ellie, it's been a 12-year journey. She started reading the Bible in secret. She didn't tell us or her friends, and she was afraid to tell her friends because she would have been ostracized. Yeah. She didn't believe. She was in this place of not believing anything.
Yeah.
And just Lori and I just praying over those years, and she's been here for a year, and God is just blowing it up. She one day she said, I want to get baptized.
Gosh.
And our youngest, and I want Jordan, my brother, to baptize me. And it was like, bang. And and so all I can say is God is ever faithful. What you learned, when I met you, your mom had only been gone about a year and a half.
Like a year, year and a half.
It was raw.
Yeah, very.
I remember that.
Yeah.
But what I see in you is a young woman that's grown and has grace
and
has kindness and tenderness, and you look out in the generation just below you, or maybe it's your generation, suicide is spiking.
Yeah.
We have the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you do that? For me, it's building relationships. This podcast is not about jamming Jesus down somebody's throat.
Right.
It's about building relationships like Jesus did with the woman at the well.
Yes.
All he did was state the facts. He never did say how bad she was or anything
right.
like that. He just told her, read her mail, right?
Yeah.
and he loved her.
Yeah.
And he was always doing radical things like that in the middle of a religiosity that was overwhelming.
Yes.
So anyway,
no, I totally agree. And I think the beauty of Hilary's story, and I'm sure also Lori's, because Lori is in a position now where she is healed and walking through, I'm sure there were a lot of days that felt like, when is there going to be an end to this?
Yeah.
Or is the end something I never wanted in the first place? And to walk the long step with God in faithfulness.
Ooh, I like that. Long obedience.
Yeah. Long obedience in the same direction. It's just that place of, he's going to be the one to do it. I just have to be obedient with what he's asking of me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, this has been so much fun. And I know,
for an hour.
I know it happens so fast. Again, we're people magnets. We like to talk. We like to listen.
True. Yeah, that's true.
But before we wrap up, I want to ask you one final question, but then also want to be able to point people to where they can find you, follow you, and see your story more in depth. So the very final question we always ask, and then we'll get into where people can follow you. What is the one word you would choose to describe the current chapter of your story?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. And that word is trust.
Yeah.
And you choose it.
Yes.
And it's not about an emotion.
Nope.
It's a decision you make. And it's trust.
Yeah. That's a good word. I think that's one I'm learning too, because it's the trust that I'm building back up, especially with the Lord. He's always constant. So usually in relationship about building trust, it's sharing back and forth and almost this, have you earned it? And he is always faithful. So it's me asking for the perspective to see where he's been faithful, where it's different than what I would have chosen.
Well, that the grace thing is have we earned it?
No.
And that's okay. I mean, in our culture, it's like you have to jump through hoops, do all this stuff so you can find your place and be part of the club. In the corporate world is do all this stuff, get the degree, blah, 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 and then you'll belong.
Yeah.
Well, with Jesus, it's, hey, you belong.
Yeah.
Now let's do this work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Good word.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, where can people find you, follow you, and all the above?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a website. It's jcpowers.com.
Yes.
Do you want me to give my phone number? Probably shouldn't, should I?
Maybe not today, but I'll link to your website and your Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, the other thing is on YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. Did I say TikTok?
Oh, yeah.
iHeartRadio. It's PowersShift, PowersShift.
Yes.
PowersShift. And Ellie, I'm going to say this.
Yes.
If you run into somebody, you really feel like needs somebody like me to talk to.
Yeah.
Give him my phone number.
I will.
You have permission to do that.
I will gladly.
And so I love people most of the time.
There can always be a caveat.
Right. And it's actually part of the commandments, right? It's the Great Commission.
Yes.
You can't pray for people and minister to them if you're not loving them.
Yes.
But anyway, so that's it.
I love it. This has been the most fun. And I'm so thankful for, as we talked about at the top of the show, there was a lot that didn't go the way we hoped with the Book Proposal Bootcamp, but the people it's offered me and the direction it's offered me, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was so formative in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And Ellie, next time we'll get you over on the PowersShift thing, but we could do this again. It's dialogue.
Gladly. The mics are always open and you and I are always ready to talk. So
cool. Yeah, let's do it.
This can happen however many times we want. And I'd love to be on y'all's show too.
All right, good. Well, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I'm so glad to. This has been the most fun. Wow, doesn't Jay's story completely blow you away? I'm thankful Jay shared so many details of his personal pain and praises in order to encourage us. His family is living proof of long obedience in the same direction. Jay and the rest of our small group from the Book Proposal Bootcamp guided me through so many elements of that process, both in writing assignments, but also in grieving with God. Please make sure you follow Jay and the PowersShift Podcast. You can find all of those links in the show notes. And as he mentioned, if you are interested in being coached by Jay, I'd be happy to make the connection, so please reach out. I'd love to know what stood out to you from this episode. Please leave a comment on Instagram via @ShareYourStoryWithEllie and follow the show while you're at it. Every like, comment, share, and subscription to the podcast helps the show get in front of new listeners. I so appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I will meet you back here on Thursday with another cohort member, Baylor.